are again for another episode of Swami Streams. Is there audio? Is the audio working? Let me just check this because I don't know if it is. Hang on, I don't see audio. Audio? There's no audio. Why is there no audio? Oh man. No audio. Check the chat window. I sound great. You have audio? Huh. That's interesting because my monitors are showing me without. Let's see if I can do something real quick. Hang on. Why isn't this? I don't know. It's weird. But you can hear me. That's what Rich Ross says. So I appreciate that. And hey, how's it going, Rich? Welcome to the show. Thanks for tuning in. I don't know why OBS is not showing me. Don't trust your eyes, they deceive. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, my trusting myself is all right. So let's switch this back then. So let's go to here's what we want to do. Okay. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I'm really kind of confused, but I'm going to assume that there's audio. So, welcome to another episode of Swami Streams. And as the title says, or as our working title is, fun, coding, and a little bit of chaos. Always start off with a little bit of chaos. Like, is the audio working? Is the audio not working? I don't know. So, I'm a little frazzled today. I'm going to take a minute to sort of get myself into streaming mode here. Just finished a 3-hour meeting where I was the presenter. I was the presenter for 3 hours, or most of a 3-hour meeting, just now at work. And now I'm like, gotta like calm down, get myself into streaming mode, and be ready to have some fun here and shift gears. And that's a little tricky sometimes. So what am I going to work on today? Or what are we going to work on today? That's what I should say. What are we going to work on? And if you're here and you're on a stream, pop into the chat, say hi. I would appreciate it. Love to know who's here. And if you're joining us for the first time, do me a favor, follow the channel on Mixer or Twitch, and subscribe on YouTube. And wherever it is that you're there, I hope you'll come back. So subscribe. So I've got this Visual Studio solution that I started to work on. Let me switch to the desktop, and you can see this lovely solution I'm working on. This is the Swami Streams website, which doesn't do much of anything yet. The idea here is we're going to build out sort of something that shows the episode history, and I can edit the episode history and put show notes in there, and that's what we're going to work on. So what I did in the last episode, just to catch everybody up, is I created this episode history orchestrator. I'm a fan of the Orchestrator Pattern, and I like to have follow solid principles as best as possible, single responsibility principle being the first. And so what I like to do is get something like an orchestrator that's going to call a bunch of small, what I call like mini services, little classes that do little bits of business, very single responsibility, and then have the orchestrator go through and call all those. And so I put a bunch of notes in here just to show what the orchestrator is going to do, and it will get the history, and it will display the history, or at least the home controller, the index method, calls the episode history orchestrator, and it gets the history. Now, I'm not using dependency injection or anything like that yet, and I will be by hopefully the end of today's episode. I'll start to put some of those things in, and we'll see how a feature like this gets built out, I think, in a way that again, my goal on this show is to build features and use the tools in a I don't know, professional way, right? Like not as a hobbyist would, but how would I be doing these in an enterprise operation with all the controls and things like that, and all the best practices that we would want to have. So, having said that, we had this orchestrator, and the orchestrator was simply calling the context, the DbContext, and getting that in to just to see if we could connect to this SQL Server database that I have running locally. And it really doesn't have much. It has a simple table in there that has a list of episodes in there. Now, I don't like any of this code. This was code just a proof of concept kind of thing. I want to get rid of all this stuff, and I don't want to call the context from in here. And I want to do other stuff as well. So get history doesn't take any parameters, so it's going to be pretty easy. So what I'd like to do is, let me think about this for a minute. What do I want to do? What if we put some paging in here just for the heck of it? So I'm going to change this get history method and say that we're going to prepare to have paging. So let's say I want to have a parameter like int page number and int page size, right? And so now we have to do some paging. We have some quote business logic that we're going to filter the results on. That'll give us a little something to do. And so if we have that, let's do this. And let's take this. I had to implement paging in here too, so that's fine. So what I tend to do is I tend to typically want to validate the input of my method. In this case, the input isn't super complicated or whatever, but I would want to make sure that let's just put in some temp code in here again. Temp code that says if page number is less than or equal to 0, right? Because we're going to start with page 1, right? So if page number is less than or equal to 0, we want to have return some error, right? And I could say the same of page size. So page size. Okay, so we have two sort of little validation rules we want to have in here. Following, the way I like to build applications, I want to move that code out of there immediately. It just doesn't belong in there. I want to follow a single responsibility principle. And so what I tend to do is, hey, Kev Griff's on. Hey, Kev, how are you, man? Thanks for joining the stream today. Big shout out going there. Glad to have you. We're building an application. We're getting started. Building an application. Again, I have all these ideas of what we're going to demonstrate with this stream over many episodes. But if you don't have a code base, if you don't have something to work with, it gets kind of, I'm glad you can chat and watch live for once too. That's awesome. So if we don't have a code base to do some stuff, it doesn't really give us anything to work with. So I'm building out a basic code base and some of the patterns that I like to follow in a simple orchestrator pattern using things like solid principles and single responsibility. So the way I tend to set up my applications is I had this orchestrator folder, and I'm about to create and add a new folder. And this is my preference. This is something that works really well for me. Other people might want to do things differently. I create a folder called Mini. And in here is where I put all these little mini single responsibility kind of classes that are going to do different things. And I tend to, although there's really not, the reason for this, some of this stuff is simply organization. I like my applications, maybe I'm a control freak and anal or whatever, but I like my applications to be really organized nicely. I find it makes it much easier to maintain them and share them with other developers and things like that. So what I typically do is I have Mini and then I have a validators folder, okay? And let's even change this. Let's make this a little more interesting. Let's have another DTO. I'll add a class called getHistory DTO. See, what is that? Let's go make sure we get that thing there. Okay, I'm going to add that. And the get history DTO is just going to have those two properties that I was messing around with there. So let's just say, I used to like to use these things, prop. I'll say int, what do I call it? Page size and prop int page number. Okay. Not the most exciting and complicated feature ever built, but that's what we're working on right now. And so I'm going to replace this, and I'm going to say get history DTO. Get history DTO. I like to use the word DTO to separate out the fact that it is not a domain object or something that would be stored. DTOs are a way of me saying this is just something I'm sharing with one layer to another and things like that. So let's go back to in here. And I've got this validators. I'm going to create a new class in here. I'm going to create a new class in here, and I'm going to call it get history DTO validator. Now, naming is important on things, and a lot of developers like myself struggle with naming. Oh, I use DTO as well. Excellent. Thanks, Kev. It's good to hear feedback from people that sort of agree or disagree even with the way that we do things, because it's great to have a conversation. If someone disagrees, I'd love to hear it as well. So naming is so important, and so I'm going to call this the Get History DTO Validator. This thing is single responsibility, and by giving it a name like that, it can't do anything other than that. Like it's so clear what it's going to do. And I can simply take out this stuff out of here and put that in here. And of course, got to need a method in there, right? So I'm going to say public void for now, just void for now, validate. Validate, and it's going to take a get history DTO. DTO. And for now, let's just finish that up. I'll paste that stuff in here, and this is going to need like DTO dot page number. I wish I was writing some more exciting stuff, but this is like the basic. The stuff I'm going to demonstrate here really just goes to the root of like how I like to build applications and the kind of patterns I do, even if the logic isn't super exciting or super complicated, right? So the next thing I like to do here, and it's really funny because I'm in the process of going through this at work, rolling out this pattern across a lot of teams and showing a lot of people how to do this. But what I like to do is return some list of messages from here. And again, I don't have any base libraries yet, and I'm going to try to do this and build this up in a natural way, like how the application would come to. So most likely in this case, I would just have a bunch of strings that come out of here, right? And so I'll create a list string, and I'll say messages or something like that. Validation messages. That's what these are. Validation messages equals new list of strings, right? And at the end of the method, I'll just return that. Return validation messages. Okay, so everything's good there. And all I'm going to say in here, I'm going to do this really lame, really simple for it now. I'm just going to say something like validation messages dot add. I'm going to say page number not valid. Good enough for now. And sorry, having some keyboard issues as usual. And I'll just say here page size not valid. Good enough for what we're working on now. And I want to use this in my orchestrator. Now, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to extract an interface out of this. And the easiest way to do that is to say extract interface. This is the Visual Studio. I believe this is a Visual. God, I get so confused with different tools I use. And sometimes I use ReSharper and sometimes I don't. I'm pretty sure this is the built-in Visual Studio thing. I like to put interfaces in the current file, and that's what I'm going to do here. I wish I could figure out how to default this. There's probably a setting for it somewhere. So now I've got this interface that I can use. Anytime I see it, I always like to remove and sort my usings and clean those up. So I'm going to take this get history validator, and I'm going to put it over here. All right, so I can get rid of temp code. And I want to use that in here. So, so in my orchestrator, I'm going to have a constructor using the old CTOR shortcut there. And I want to say I'm going to have a I get history validate, no, get history DTO validator. And see if it like, I'll just call it validator for now. And get that. And I think the default tooling is going to allow me to, I think there's a tip here that says, no, I don't know. I'm used to using different tools and I got to set up this. For some reason, Visual Studio, this version doesn't have it on here. So easily enough, I'm just going to say, I want one of these up in here. There's tooling that makes a lot of this much easier. I'm going to make this private. I'm going to make it read-only as a best practice. And my thing, and this is somewhat controversial, if you're watching, I'd love to know what you think. I like using an underscore for class level variables. Some people say that is completely unnecessary. I find it really helpful, especially if I was to name it even better and call it this. Then right here, I could say get history validator equals validator. And I've got my dependency injection sort of prepped and ready to go. And then all I would do is say validator, get history validator. Oh, I named it wrong. Get history DTO validator. Let's do that, and let's do that. And for proof, for other sake, really, we could be explicit like that. And then it really shows the value of having the underscore there, which I think is helpful. Again, I know it's something not everybody does. I'm going to say validate, and I'm going to take my parameters and put it into there. And what that will do is it'll give me the results, right? And I can find out if there's a problem, if I can't accept it. And I'm going to now deal with the results of that. It's funny, I'm already going in a direction that I wasn't anticipating. But another pattern I like to do is, right now I have a problem. So this method, getHistory, returns this list of show history DTOs, which is what we want. But it's not always enough. So what if I have a validation issue right now? What if I want to return some more information to the user? And that's really what I want to do. When I say the user, I mean the consumer of this code, which is really going to be me. But I want to make things easier for myself. So what I really want to do is have some sort of class. You know what? I'll start a new class over here. I'm going to create a new folder for this, because even though they're kind of DTOs, they're going to be a little different, and I'm going to play with them in a different way later. So I'm going to say results. I'll just put that there for now. And in here, I'm going to create a new class, and I'll call it the episode history result. No, the get episode history result. Okay. And again, what I'm doing here, there are better ways to do this. But if I was thinking about like building this application from scratch, I don't know there's better ways yet. I don't know there's more important things that are going to come up later. So I'm going to sort of build this in a very plain old way and improve upon it in time over the show. So what I'd like to do is have a couple properties in here. So the first one will be called status. I want to know, did this method work as intended? And then I'm going to say prop, and I'm going to say I want to return the data. So I'll say there are results. No, sorry. I will say this is a list of episode history. Well, that's going to get interesting as well. Show history DTO. That's what it was. The show history DTO. Maybe the naming isn't perfect, but I'll get there, and I'll call this the results. Okay. And then, why is that? Yep, got to use that. And lastly, I'm going to put on here, and this is the thing we're getting at here, I need a way to return a list of errors. So I'm going to return a list of strings in this case. I'll call it messages, and I'll get and set that. Now, this is not very generic, right? Spoiler alert, right? This is not very generic, and it needs to be, and it will be soon, or maybe not in today's episode. But let's do that. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change this orchestrator to not return this list, but to return this object. And now, with that, I have the ability to add some messages in here, right? And that's fine. Let's put that in there. Why is it on? Oh, I gotta do the results. And then down here, I did have this code in here that calls my my context. Although this is going to get taken out of here. Let's just say results.add. And what I didn't do, and I always forget to do, if you're like me, is I need to, whoops, I want to say results equals new, just those things, and I want to say messages equals new list of string. That'll prevent that from causing trouble. So, so I've got that, and let's save all these things here. So now this should work, and I can take the results of these things, and I can even say something like, let's just say results.messages. Come on, results.messages equals that set of data, right? And here I can say something like, again, I'm just winging it here. If results.messages.any, at this point, if there are any, I know we have a problem because this thing only returns the errors. I could say something like results.status equals, oh no, I don't want to change it to status. Oh, that's all right, I'll just say false. I really want to call this success. Let's go back to this thing and rename it. Success. Okay. And I say it's false, and I might as well just return it, right? I'm done. Return results. And of course, if there aren't errors, I'm going to keep going with the rest of the code that's going to get the history. But this is like a standard thing I like to do. Now, eventually, this is going to go away, right? I'll even put it in here. Of course, result object can and will be made generic. But that's not the point. The point isn't how to use generics right now. The point is to use this pattern and say, I want to return more complicated messages out of here. So right now it does that, and it does call this context. And so this actually should work, even though I'm not even using the paging stuff. That's not really the point, believe it or not. What I do need to do is go back over to the home controller, and in this case, so we're going to have some dependency injection problems, and we're going to fix that. But also, my getHistory object needs to take a new, I'm just going to say it needs to take a new, ooh, I hate that by default. Let's get rid of that and say a new getHistory DTO. I'm not even going to set the properties of it, but I am going to, of course, set the using statement up for it. So it doesn't matter that they're, I guess it does matter. Let's just say page size equals 10, you know, standard kind of thing, and page number equals 1. Fine, no big deal. But we immediately have a problem because episode history orchestrator cannot be created. It can't be created because it needs to have this getHistory validator. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a little dependency injection, and we're going to do it that way. So, and that's the best way to do this stuff anyway. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this getHistory orchestrator and I'm going to extract an interface, just like we did before. And I'm going to add it to the current file. It only has one method. So I now have an interface. You don't have to use interfaces to do this, but I like it, and I think it helps with other things, including testing and things like that. So we have this thing in here. I'm going to go over to my home controller, And instead of newing up this orchestrator, and if you're a fan of dependency injection, the new keyword is usually a good indicator that you're doing something you don't want to do. So let's put this episode history orchestrator in here. Okay. And I'll do the same thing here. I'll say private read-only episode history orchestrator, and I'll call it the episode history orchestrator, although it's not giving me the naming stuff I like. I guess it's because I don't have all the tools installed on here. So I'll do this, and of course, just like we do with other dependency injection, I'll say equals episode history orchestrator. And essentially now we've taken this dependency and we've injected it into the home controller, which we can now use right like this, and we can get rid of that. So it would work. The problem is going to be that when this home controller gets created, it's going to fail because the home controller doesn't know how to inject in the episode history orchestrator. So to fix that, I'm going to go over to my startup in my ASP.NET project, and I can go into here and configure services. And in here, I can tell ASP.NET, hey, when you go to create something, here's how you can do it. All right? Basically, you're giving it instructions. So I'm going to say services.add, and I'll do add transient. I guess it doesn't really matter. Transient is going to be every time we create an instance of the class, create a new one, which is going to be fine for this case. And I'm going to say, I'm just going to copy this and make it easier. If I want an episode history orchestrator, please give me an episode history orchestrator, which is the implementation, and probably doesn't know about these. Okay, so this is telling ASP.NET to help me with my dependencies. Okay, there's a difference between dependency injection and what's called like an IOC container, an inversion of control container. The dependency injection is the fact that I've provided a way to inject my class that I need into my home controller. That's dependency injection right there. However, there are tools that will make it much easier for me. And something like, I guess they're called IOC containers, makes that easier for you. And so I'm saying, hey, when you need this, this is what you use. So what's going to happen now is ASP.NET is going to create my controller. It knows it needs my controller, and it's going to come into here and say, well, I can't create that without giving it an episode history orchestrator. Episode history orchestrator, it has instructions and knows how to create that. Let's take a look at the episode history, and it has a constructor as well, right? It needs this get history DTO validator. So in order to instantiate this thing, it needs to satisfy these dependencies as well. So what I need to do is I also need to tell services.add transient, and I'll do the same thing for the get history validator, and I will just do that. Now, there's easier ways to configure some of these things with different tooling, and I'll get into that soon because this can get kind of cumbersome, I think. And if we did this, this should work. And I'm going to, let's see, wait, what did I forget? Now, of course, I don't have a way to display the errors or anything like that, but that's okay. Let's put a breakpoint. We have a breakpoint here. Let's do it like that. And let's run this and see what happens. Oh, actually, we won't get any errors because I think I satisfied my error, build errors. I should have tried compiling. Oh, that's good. What did I forget? I never finished that line of code. So here's a question. If you're watching, and if you're watching after the case on YouTube in the archive, feel free to comment on this. But what do you guys feel about line length? A lot of people have rules that say you can't go past here, and so you need to wrap this code in such a way like that. I've never really embraced that. I've always rolled out far out. Oh, excuse me. Unless it's really, really long. I just kind of let it roll out to there. Hang on one sec. Just want to check some stuff here. Just checking some things on my computer. Okay, sorry. Just like to keep an eye on various things that are working here with streaming and stuff like that. And make sure that the stream hasn't like died or anything like that. And it does seem to still be up. So I don't know. It's just a question. Like, you know, is that a good standard to have, like page size and stuff like that? Anyway, where was I? So this should run now, I hope. Not even doing anything with the history. We're just catching it here because the next thing I want to do is keep wiring up some more interesting stuff. Take a drink here. Let's do my old... Come on. Come on. What happened? Come on. Oh, look at that. It still has me. That's fine. Oh, here we go. Hey, look at that. Oh, my sound effect actually didn't time too badly. Here it is. I should have done this differently. I should have put the breakpoint here. Let's go back. Let's go back and run that again. So I'm going to go into my orchestrator. I don't know what the heck. So here I am. And I'm going to validate. Oh, I did that too fast too. Step back. Validate. And of course, this thing says the page number is 1. That's fine. And the page size is 10. That's fine. But if it did, it would return error messages. And we would see that. And then what happens next is it goes down to this context. That's the next thing we're going to work on is getting this out of here. Because I don't like that. But I just wanted to demonstrate a little bit of the DI stuff. So it's going to get me my list of history. I have one because there's one episode in the database, which is of course not a real episode. It just has some lame. Oh, here it is, right? I create that in a little DTO and I return that. And there it is. The result has 1, which says test in it. That's all it is. No big deal. So, but I'm starting to build out this framework of the way I personally like to build applications, right? Which is to say, I like to use the orchestrator pattern. I like to use single responsibility. And I'm demonstrating that here in this validator, which simply does one thing. And then I also like to use these kind of like result objects, and we can definitely improve upon this. And these are the kind of patterns I like to have. I also demonstrated DTOs in and out, not using domain objects because we convert them here. So it's kind of coming along. What I really is bugging me, and I didn't get to in the last episode, is the fact that we have this database context here, which is an entity framework thing. It really does not belong in my orchestrator. I really want to use this down lower in the pattern. So I'm a fan of the repository pattern. And what I can start to do is build out a repository that will use my data context here, or my database context here. So I'm going to go down into my folder, and in the mini, I tend to put these in here as well and make a little folder of the, I'll make another folder. I'm going to call these repositories. Repositories, should I call it singular? I called validators as plural. I guess I have to say repositories is plural too. Not sure if I like that. I think I usually make them singular, but whatever. Repositories. Let's create a new class in here. And I want to work with the episode list. So I'm going to have an episode repository. Repository.cs. I'll add that there. Now, I'll be honest, I don't usually do it in this manner. So I have to kind of think through this a little bit. I have a lot of base classes that I have in my own libraries that I reuse for creating generic repositories and things like that. Repository is a great example of something that you can use generics on and get a lot of code reuse out of here. But I kind of think it's cool to go through and start from the beginning and build like a single repository. I mean, again, it's a spoiler alert. Build a single repository, build a second repository, and start to look and say, hey, how can I make this simpler? This is the steps you would go through if you were building your own code, right? So I want to do an episode repository. Now, the repository pattern, following the repository pattern, a repo, as we call them, repo, should work with one data set. Okay, now I'm using sort of mixed terminology here, but I want to use them sort of generically. So if you think often as a database with lots of tables, a database is a data source, right? Data can come from a database, it can come from a file system, it can come from a lot of places, by the way. And the repository pattern can be used to apply to all of those. But in this case, we're going to use it over a SQL table, SQL database. The database itself is a data source. It might have lots of different data pieces in there. I like to use the analogy that a database is a data source and a table in the database is a data set, right? And that matches up pretty well with Entity Framework type of terminology, and we're using Entity Framework here as well. So the other thing a repository should do is it should abstract the mechanism of the data access. So the rest of the application doesn't really need to know that I'm using a SQL database, an Entity Framework, and things like that. The repository hides that. And the other thing a repository should do is expose like CRUD methods, like get, delete, things like that, add those CRUD methods, and it shouldn't really deal with business logic. Okay, now things get a little interesting when you have Entity Framework, but we're going to keep going and I'm going to build out this repository. So what I probably want on here is like a get, delete, and I usually do like insert up or update, right? Kind of like together, because with Entity Framework that gets pretty easy to do as one thing. And let's just sort of go with that for now. So I need a method that is going to return. Now, again, controversial topic. I'm using Entity Framework. Entity Framework exposes the iQueryable, or gives us the iQueryable as a feature. iQueryable in some ways kind of breaks the idea of the repository pattern because it allows you to not really... in a repository pattern, you should execute a query against the database, or in this case, a database, and return the results of that up to the caller out of the repository. But, oh man, Entity Framework has an iQueryable, and iQueryable is so cool and so powerful. And so and I've done some reading on this, other people sort of agree that it's kind of okay for the repository pattern with Entity Framework to expose the iQueryable. I could see why people might feel uncomfortable about that, because once I give the iQueryable back up to higher layers, I can really do other stuff with it, right? And it's a little risky, but I'm going to keep going with this, and I'm going to say I want to return an iQueryable of episode history is what I think they're called. Let's see if I got that name right. Oh yeah, I got to use link, and no. What did I call it? Let's go over here. I guess I can pin this, make life a little easier for me. So my model is called, it's called an episode. Okay, fine. So I want to get an episode, and because I'm using Entity Framework and I'm referring to them as iQuerybles, I'm sort of going to, I like to call these things like all. And now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think I usually do this as, yeah. So let's just do it like this. And the method's going to be called all, and we're going to return that. So what we need is an instance of our data context. And to do that, I have in the model, I have the DbContext, okay? And the DbContext is Swami Stream's DbContext. I'm going to extract my interface from there. I'm going to put it in the same class because that's the way I like to roll. And it really just has this episodes method for now, and that's fine. So I'm going to do that, and I want to I want to go into here and create a constructor that takes one of these. Come on, I'm clicking. It's not working. That's interesting. I was clicking the thing. That's interesting. I'm clicking there. Oh, wow, that was weird. Not sure what was going on there. Let's do the same old dependency injection stuff we've been doing before. I'm going to make this private and make it read-only. And I'll give it the old underscore name. And I'm going to have to get my references things type set up there. Okay, now this all method isn't going to do much, quite frankly, right? What this is going to do is return my context. My context has a bunch of data sets in it, DB sets in this case, but we're concerned with episodes. And so I'm going to return the episodes, right? And I really just want to return all of them because it is an iQueryable, right? It's a DB set in this case. And so I can return that as an iQueryable, and that should be fine. So let me just think here. So that's fine. I've got a repository. Okay. Now, what I don't have going on is this dependency injection isn't going to totally work. What I need to do is set this thing up. In the previous example, let's see, where am I here? In my, not my home controller, in my, I've got too many things open here. In my orchestrator, I was creating an instance of the the DbContext. Terrible. Definitely don't want to do that. Okay. What I need to do is configure this so dependency injection will work. And there's some ways to do special DI stuff for Entity Framework. So I'm going to go to my startup. And here in configure services, and I was starting to do something here. I don't think that's right. I'm going to do, and I actually have a little snippet here that I wrote because I knew this was going to be, I hate to have to do too much stuff that I don't always remember. I want to do add DbContext, and we'll see that method there, add DbContext. Okay. And it's a Swami Streams DbContext. I want to add that. Okay. And I want to set the provider for it. So I'll even wrap this down here. Provider.get service. And it's going to be Swami Streams DbContext. Oh, this is, no, I'm actually on the wrong line in my sample. See that? I'm kind of, let's see, is that, I'm going to need that soon, but this is not what I wanted to do. Let's go back up, add DbContext, Swami Streams, and I want to set options. Okay, I actually mixed up a couple lines of code here. So this thing needs options, okay? And so the options, I'm going to say options.use SQL Server. This is the one I want to do here. Whoop. I want to do use SQL Server. Now I can't do use SQL Server, I don't think. Do I have that? I think, actually I do have that, I think installed. Use SQL Server. Let's see. Is it asking me for, yeah, use Microsoft Entity Framework Core. Cool. It knows about that. Of course, I need the parameters for that. And I need to give it a connection string. So I'm going to say configuration. And I'm going to do, this is the ASP.NET Core way to do things. I'll say connection string is Swami. You know what? Let's just copy and paste this out of here. I've got my app settings. I've got a connection string collection. And I've got my Swami Streams collection. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to put that in here. End quote. And that's good. So now, what this means is that my ASP.NET application knows how to generate a Swami Streams DbContext, which is my Entity Framework DbContext. However, it still doesn't know how to fulfill the use I need of the Swami Streams DbContext. And you know what? Why don't I just copy it? Because I have it over here. Because I prepped this a little bit. And now you can see that doing a similar thing to here, add scoped. iSwami streams DbContext, but in this case, instead of just saying generate one of these things magically, go to the provider, get the service that this thing already created. If I do that, and we're getting there, we're getting somewhere here with this code. I'm kind of excited that I'm actually getting somewhere, and this application is going to start to look less like a piece of garbage, quite frankly. Let's get rid of that. And now I want to do something like, and I'm going to change this again too. Oh, I don't have my repository. Oh man, still more stuff to do, right? Dependency injection is really cool, but there's all these little, these little steps that I like to do, like extracting the interfaces and stuff like that. And I was jumping a little fast and I didn't do that one. No big deal. So I'm going to go over to my orchestrator and I'm going to say, not only do I need validator, but I need my repo. So I'll say episode history, episode repository. It's going to take one of those and of course create it here. Whoops. Private read only episode repository. Oh no, that's not what I wanted. Just copy it from here for gosh sakes. It doesn't like it because I haven't put the using in there yet for it, but that's okay, I will. I'll put my little underscore back in front of that and let's add my usings. Okay, it should be happy there. And let's do episode repository equals episode repository. Now we're getting close here. Now I can use that episode repository here. Okay, it's going to look a little different though. It's not episode, it's going to be this. So repository all. I haven't put the paging in there yet. That's fine. I'm just going to say all. And then I want to do toList on that because this will return an iQueryable and the history. I guess I could do it a different way because it'll loop through it here. But let's just do it that way anyway. toList. Okay. So, what is this? Save changes. That doesn't go in this. That was something I was playing with before. Okay. So, let's see if this works. And I'll be kind of excited if it does, if I got all this right. Let's try to build it first. See if it compiles. Now, I don't have unit tests, and of course, that really should be the next thing I'm doing is to add unit tests for this. But I'm so eager to get like a code base going. It's kind of, I did this already. Set as default. Oh, you know what? That's going to tell me to go here. Oh, that's why this came up before. It wants me to choose. So I just started using, oh, I saw an error there. I just started using Edge as the default. I don't know why it's not saving that. Okay. Some services are not able to be constructed. Service type, episode history orchestrator. Oh, what did I do wrong? Let's see. Oh, well, wait, hang on. Unable to resolve service for episode repository. Right. I thought I went and added that in here, but I did not. I had it in my head, and I guess I didn't actually do it. So, again, this thing can only provide dependencies that it understands about. There's some other tools that will make that easier. But let's put in this episode repository. Come on. I knew I couldn't get it to run on the first shot. That would have been a lot to expect. All right. So, let's find out if this works. I should say also while I'm waiting for this, hey, do me a favor, like, subscribe, do all those kind of things you could if you're watching on one of these channels. I really appreciate it. I'd appreciate it if you're here. Feel free to add some comments, some questions in the archive or live. Join in the conversation. It's great to have people. We're going to do this episode history orchestrator. We're going to go down. We validate it. We know that works already. Let's find out if this works. I'm just going to jump it and say, Okay, it has one in there, so it worked. All my dependency injection for this repository all worked. So of course I don't actually show the results anywhere, but we can see it right here, and it's converted it into a nice result object. So I'm pretty happy with that. So, the kind of feedback I'd like to hear from people, again, even in the comments on YouTube, if you're watching this, is does this pattern resonate with you? Is this kind of the way you, is this the way you build software? Is this a pattern that seems like it would be helpful and a nice clean way of building software? So what we have, again, there's not a lot of complex logic in here, but we've got these nice single responsibility classes. We've got an orchestrator, which is single responsibility. Its single responsibility is to orchestrate the calling of these other things, right? So it calls the validator. It calls the repo. And we're going to change this soon too, and add some other layers into here that has some other features. And it also converts. Oh, so it doesn't yet. We're going to take this logic out. This needs to be off in some class we'll call a converter. I don't think I'm going to do that today. I feel like this was a decent amount of stuff to get done in a day. We wired up dependency injection. We wired up dependency injection for the DbContext as well, which is something I didn't have time to do in the last thing. And this is starting to take shape of some kind of feature here. Like we have the ability to start to get data in and out in a modern, maintainable way using what I consider best practices. And I think, I've got like 4 minutes left. And so again, I said this each episode, I'm trying to work on like getting in and getting out. I'm going to check in my code while I'm talking. I want to get in and get out and it's an episode. It's kind of hard. My instinct is, keep going, add some more features, do some more stuff. But I'm not gonna. So let's just say, what did I get done here? I moved logic into mini services. That's what I call them, mini services. Think single responsibility principle, right? And got DI working for classes. I don't know if this is the right thing to say. And DbContext. Okay, so I did that. In the next episode, I should probably start doing testing. If I'm being, like a good developer, that's what I should be doing. So why don't I do that? I'll check this in. So that's kind of it. Now, if you're watching live, and if anyone's still watching me live, I have no idea if anybody's watching. I don't have the biggest audience in the world, but I have a few, and I appreciate that. Tonight, I should have plugged this earlier because Rich was on earlier, and I didn't plug our show, the Dev Talk Show at 8:30 p.m. on Wednesdays. So every Wednesday at noon, I do this little Swami Streams silliness. But Wednesday nights at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard, we do the Dev Talk Show. It's Chris Gomez, Rich Ross, and myself talking about all kinds of developer things. One of the things we're going to talk about tonight is the concept of standards and for developers. Should a department have standards? And what should they be? And actually, in my case, some of these patterns that I'm demonstrating here fit into the standards that we're rolling out at my organization, and I think it's pretty important. Kev says I'm popular. 15 people. Yeah, I don't know how I got 15 people. That seems... I saw that earlier, and I'll be honest, I thought maybe it was a mistake. But I'll be happy with 15. I love all those 15 people that are here, and so I know it's a plug and asking for more and more and more. That's what I do. I'm shameless. I'll ask you to subscribe to my channels, but I'll also say come back tonight on the Dev Talk Show channels. So it's mixer.com/the Dev Talk Show, twitch.tv/the Dev Talk Show, and YouTube. It's complicated and it's easier to go to video.thedevtalkshow.com will take you to our YouTube channel. And so we're going to be talking about standards and stuff like that. I would love for that conversation to really not just be a conversation between the three of us hosts, but to really get feedback from people that are watching live. In the comments, throw in your suggestions for the standards that you think would fit in place. That's what we hope for that show, for that Dev Talk show, to really be like a nice talk show, really conversational, really get ideas and inputs and really involve everybody in from the outside community and really have fun with that. And I think it would be great. And so if you're listening, please not come back to this exact channel, but maybe I can host those channels. That would be cool. I got to learn how to do that. I got to learn how to host these other shows. I know Rich and Chris both know how to do that. So maybe tonight, here's my reminder. If you're watching now, remind me tonight to also host those streams on my channel. And so I hope you'll come back next week. Next week, we're going to do some unit testing. We're going to take this a little further. We're going to keep expanding upon these features and keep building out this application. In the future, I've got a list, if you're kind of curious. I have these topics of all these kind of things that I think will be great once I have a little bit of a code base. And I'm starting to do some of these things already. We haven't built out any pipelines yet for this. I always say the first thing you should do is build out a pipeline on day one. We're sort of at like day 3, but we're not too far, and so I'll get that going. We're going to build, we got a little bit of a database. I'd like to include that in the pipelines. I'd like to build multiple front ends for this app, an MVC app, an Angular app, a React app. How about a Blazor? Blazor's the big thing now. Let's put Blazor on there, right? I need a Blazor page for this thing. Once I have a code base, once I have some things that we can do, we can add all these different kind of front ends to it. I'd like to show how to deploy static sites in Azure and maybe make this a static site. How to do all these different things and talk about unit tests, solid, Azure policy as we start going to Azure with this. These are all things that I find really helpful, really important. You can see I've got a long list of topics. And so stick with me. Come back for more. For, as I'm saying, a little more, some code, some fun, and a little bit of chaos with the Dev Talk Show. With the Dev Talk Show. That's the other show. This is Shwami Streams and Shwami Streams. And so with that, I'm gonna wrap this episode. Thanks for coming, and see you soon.